Marcus Caldwell had built the Ember Lounge with his own 2 hands, not metaphorically but literally. He had laid the dark hardwood floors himself, sanded every plank until his palms bled, and painted the exposed brick walls the color of smoldering coal at 3 in the morning, while his daughter slept in a car seat in the corner, bundled under a fleece blanket with a dinosaur print. That was 7 years ago. Tonight, as he stood at the entrance of what had become one of the most sought-after private dining venues in Atlanta, he wore the same quiet dignity he always had, a crisp charcoal shirt, dark slacks, and work boots he hadn't bothered to replace because he never saw the point of pretending to be something he wasn't. The Ember Lounge was not the kind of place that advertised itself. It didn't need to. Word had spread the way good things always do, slowly, quietly, and with absolute certainty. Nestled on the 2nd floor of a restored warehouse in the old 4th Ward neighborhood, it had 12 tables, a private chef, a sommelier named Gerald, who once worked at a Michelin-starred restaurant in New Orleans, and a waiting list that stretched 4 months out. The kind of people who dined there valued discretion more than decor. Athletes, musicians, executives, people who were tired of being watched while they ate. Marcus valued every single one of them, not for their money, though the money had certainly changed his life, but because each reservation represented trust. And Marcus Caldwell did not take trust lightly. "Daddy, can I stay up until the last table leaves tonight?" He looked down at Zara, his 8-year-old daughter, who had her mother's eyes and his stubbornness, and absolutely no understanding of the concept of bedtime. She was sitting on the hostess stool behind the front desk, her braids freshly done with gold beads that clinked softly whenever she moved her head, which was constantly. "No, baby," he said, adjusting the small radio on the desk so it faced away from the dining room. "Miss Patrice is picking you up at 9. That's final." Zara made a sound somewhere between a groan and a huff. "I'm practically 9, Dad." "You're 8 and 3 months. That's practically 9. He almost smiled. Almost. "Go check that the napkins in the VIP room are folded right. Gerald says Dante keeps folding them like envelopes instead of fans." She slid off the stool with the theatrical energy of someone auditioning for a role and disappeared through the velvet curtain that separated the main floor from the private VIP lounge at the back. Marcus exhaled. Friday nights were always the heaviest, and tonight the VIP room had been booked by a single party. A reservation made 6 weeks ago under the name Whitmore Group. No further details given, which was unusual. Normally, Marcus required at least a general description of the occasion so Gerald could plan accordingly. But the deposit had arrived within the hour, $1,500, and the contact number went to a concierge service, which meant whoever was coming didn't want to be reachable. That alone should have made him pay closer attention. Gerald emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron, his silver locks pulled back neatly. At 61, he moved through a kitchen the way a musician moves through a song, unhurried, precise, completely in his own world. "Rack of lambs resting," Gerald said. "Mushroom bisque is done. Appetizer course is plated and holding at temperature." "How's the salmon?" Gerald gave him a look. "How's the salmon?" he repeated flatly, as though the question had personally offended him. "I just asked." "The salmon is perfect, Marcus." "The salmon is always perfect." Marcus nodded. "What about the Hendricks order?" "The couple at table 4 requested the tasting menu with the dairy substitution. Handled it an hour ago." "And the wine pairing for the VIP room?" Gerald paused, and in that pause something shifted almost imperceptibly. "I pulled the bottles myself this afternoon. 2 reds, 1 white, 1 sparkling. I put them in the rack in the VIP prep station." "You checked them?" "I checked the labels." Marcus didn't respond immediately. He filed the distinction away, checked the labels, not checked the bottles, and decided to walk through the VIP room himself before the party arrived. It was something he did most nights anyway, more ritual than necessity. He liked to stand in the room before the guests arrived, feel its readiness, let the space tell him if anything was off. He pushed through the velvet curtain at 8:14. The VIP room was the jewel of the Ember Lounge, smaller than the main floor, more intimate, lit by a single large pendant lamp that cast a warm amber glow across the table. The walls held 3 original paintings by a local artist Marcus had commissioned when he first opened, abstract pieces in deep burgundy and gold that somehow managed to feel both contemporary and timeless. The table was set for 8. Zara had in fact fixed all the napkins. They were perfect fans. Marcus moved to the prep station in the corner, a small credenza that held the evening's wine selection. He picked up the first red, a 2019 Napa Valley Cabernet, and turned it slowly in his hands. The label was pristine. He pulled the cork. The smell hit him before his mind had time to form the thought. It was wrong. Not subtle wrong, not slightly off wrong. It was the smell of something that had crossed a line it couldn't come back from. Vinegar sharp and flat at the same time. The unmistakable signature of a wine that had been exposed to heat at some point during storage and had oxidized completely. It was undrinkable. He set it down and opened the second red. Same thing. His jaw tightened. He checked the white. Cloudy, with a faint but distinct sour note. The sparkling was the only bottle that seemed intact, and even that he wasn't certain about. He stood in the amber-lit room for a moment, his hands still, his mind moving fast. He walked back to the kitchen. Gerald. The VIP wine is compromised, all of it except possibly the sparkling. Gerald turned from the stove. The look on his face was not surprise, and that was the second thing Marcus filed away. Where did you pull those bottles from? The rack, same place I always... Which rack, Gerald? The main cellar or the side storage? A beat. The side storage. The main cellar was locked. I couldn't find your key. Marcus kept his expression neutral. The side storage hasn't been temperature controlled since Tuesday. The compressor went out. I've been waiting on a part. The silence between them was not comfortable. I didn't know that, Gerald said. I sent a message to the whole staff on Wednesday. Gerald said nothing. Marcus turned and walked back to the front. He had 22 minutes before the Whitmore party arrived, compromised wine, and a question forming in the back of his mind that he didn't yet have the language for. He picked up his phone to call his wine distributor about an emergency delivery when the front door opened. She walked in 12 minutes early. She was the kind of woman who entered a room and immediately became the room's center of gravity without appearing to try. Dark hair over her shoulders, a cream blazer that probably cost more than Marcus's first car, gold earrings catching the low light. She was followed by 2 men in suits who were clearly assistants, not dining companions, by the way they held tablets and hovered slightly behind her left shoulder. She looked around the Ember Lounge the way someone looks at a painting they're considering buying, assessing, not yet committed. Her eyes found Marcus and stopped. You're the owner, she said. Not a question. Marcus Caldwell, he said. You're early. I'm always early. She extended her hand. Vivian Whitmore. He shook it. Her grip was firm and brief, and entirely deliberate. The rest of my party will be here at 8:30, she said, glancing past him toward the velvet curtain. I'd like to see the VIP room, of course. He gestured for her to follow him and made a quiet decision in the same moment. He would not serve her the food that had been prepared for her table tonight until he had personally inspected every single dish. The wine was already disqualified. And the way Gerald had paused when asked about the bottles was still sitting uneasily somewhere behind Marcus's sternum. He held the curtain open for Vivian Whitmore, and she walked into the amber-lit room, and Marcus watched her take in the paintings, the table setting, the warm glow of the pendant light. It's beautiful, she said, and there was something almost surprised in her voice, as though she had not expected it to be. Thank you, Marcus said. What neither of them knew yet was that before the night was over, Marcus would shut the entire lounge down, every table, every course, every reservation, and that the reason he did it would have nothing to do with the wine. Vivian Whitmore had not become the CEO of Whitmore Hospitality Group by being careless. She had built her company from a single boutique hotel in Savannah, Georgia, into a portfolio of 14 luxury properties across the Southeast, and she had done it with the kind of methodical precision that left very little room for sentiment. She was 39 years old. She had been featured on the cover of 3 business magazines in the past 2 years, and she had not taken a vacation in longer than she could honestly remember. Her assistant, a sharp young man named Elliot, had once suggested she take a long weekend in Charleston, and she had responded by handing him a revised quarterly report and asking him to find the error on page 7. There had been an error on page 7. She was not cold. That was the misunderstanding people made about her, the ones who read the magazine profiles and absorbed only the surface. She was precise. There was a difference. Though she had long since stopped trying to explain it to people who had already made up their minds, what very few people knew about Vivian was that she had a daughter. Camille was 11, and she lived primarily with Vivian's mother in a quiet suburb of Decatur, because Vivian's travel schedule made consistency impossible, and consistency, she had decided years ago, was the most important thing a child could have. It was a decision she had made with clarity and practicality, and absolutely no peace of mind. She called Camille every night at 8 o'clock, no matter what time zone she was in, no matter what meeting she was pulling herself out of. She had missed exactly 4 calls in 3 years, and she remembered each one with a precision that had nothing to do with business. Tonight's reservation at the Ember Lounge was not personal. It was a strategic dinner, 7 members of her acquisitions team, a preliminary conversation about a potential new property in the old 4th Ward that she'd had her eye on for 8 months. But when she stood in the amber-lit VIP room and looked at the paintings on the wall and the careful geometry of the table setting, something shifted very slightly inside her chest. It felt, unexpectedly, like a place someone had loved before they'd let anyone else into it. She turned to look at Marcus Caldwell, who was standing near the doorway with the quiet, self-contained energy of a man who had nothing to prove and knew it. "How long have you been open?" she asked. 7 years in March, he said. "And you own the building?" A faint pause. "I do now." She understood what that meant, what it cost, what it took. She nodded once, with something that was not quite respect and not quite surprise, but sat somewhere usefully between the two. "I'll wait for my team at the bar," she said. "Please let the kitchen know we have 1 guest with a tree nut allergy. It wasn't on the reservation. I apologize for that. I'll let them know." She walked back through the velvet curtain, and Marcus stood alone in the VIP room for another moment. He pulled out his phone and sent a message to his kitchen assistant, a 24-year-old named Dante, who was talented and fast and occasionally distracted. Full review of every VIP dish before plating. "Tree nut allergy, 1 guest. I want eyes on every component." Dante responded immediately with a thumbs up. Marcus almost wrote back to tell him that a thumbs up was not a confirmation, then let it go. He returned to the kitchen. Gerald was at the stove, his back to the door, and the kitchen smelled the way it always did on a Good Friday night, layered and warm, like the air itself was being seasoned. But Marcus moved to the reach-in refrigerator where the appetizer course was being held and opened it slowly. The mushroom bisque was in individual ramekins, covered in plastic wrap, lined up in 2 neat rows. He picked up the first one, pulled the wrap back, and leaned in. The smell was wrong again, not dramatically, not the way the wine had been. This was subtler, a faint sourness underneath the earthiness of the mushrooms, the kind of thing that might not register to someone who wasn't looking for it, the kind of thing that a distracted kitchen could miss on a busy night. But Marcus had grown up with a grandmother who cooked for a living and who had taught him that the nose knows before the eye does. And his nose was telling him clearly that this bisque had been prepared with cream that had turned. He set the ramekin down. He picked up the next one. Same thing. He checked 3 more. All of them. He stood very still for a moment. The wine. Now the bisque. Both from this evening's VIP prep. He thought about Gerald's pause when asked about the wine storage. He thought about the compressor that had gone out on Tuesday and the staff message that Gerald claimed not to have received. He thought about the fact that Gerald had been unusually quiet all evening, which was not like him. Gerald was a man who narrated his own cooking the way sports commentators narrate a game. Marcus walked to Gerald's station and stood beside him. "The bisque is off," he said quietly. Gerald stirred the sauce in front of him without turning. "It was fine when I checked it." "When did you check it?" "This afternoon." "The cream was fresh this afternoon?" "Everything was fresh when I checked it." Marcus waited. Gerald did not turn around. "Gerald," Marcus said, and his voice was still quiet, but something in it changed. Not louder, just heavier, the way a door sounds different when it's about to close for good. Look at me. Gerald turned. He was a proud man, and pride was written into every line of his face, and right now that pride was doing a very poor job of hiding something else. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Marcus asked. The kitchen sounds filled the space between them. The hiss of something reducing on the back burner, the hum of the ventilation, the distant clink of glasses from the bar where Vivian Whitmore was waiting for her team. "I've been offered a position," Gerald said finally, "at a new place, opening in Buckhead. They've been putting pressure on me." Marcus said nothing. "They wanted to know your reservation list, your suppliers, your pricing structure." Gerald's jaw was tight. "I didn't give them any of that. I want you to know that." "But," Marcus said, "but they said if I could create a bad enough experience for a high-profile party tonight, one that got back to the right people, it would help them. It would make Ember look unreliable. And I—" He stopped. He looked at the sauce he'd been stirring, as though he'd forgotten what it was for. "I pulled the wrong wine storage. I used cream I knew was yesterday's. I told myself it wasn't enough to really hurt anyone." Marcus looked at him for a long time. Gerald was 61 years old and had given 6 of those years to the Ember Lounge. He had taught Dante everything Dante knew. He had once stayed until 2 in the morning to redo an entire dessert course because he'd decided the texture wasn't right, even though the guests had already gone home. "How high profile?" Marcus said. Gerald looked at him. "The party tonight," Marcus said. "Did whoever approached you tell you who was coming?" Something moved across Gerald's face. "They said it was a woman, a hotel developer. They said if she had a bad enough experience, she'd pull her interest in the neighborhood." Marcus thought about Vivian Whitmore standing in his VIP room, looking at his paintings with something almost like surprise. He thought about the way she had said it's beautiful, and the way it had sounded like she hadn't planned on meaning it. He thought about Zara, asleep by now in Miss Patrice's apartment 2 blocks away, who had gold beads in her braids and who thought 8 and 3 months was practically 9. He thought about what this lounge meant, not the money, not the waiting list, not the magazine mentions he'd never sought out, but what it actually meant, what it had cost him, what it had taken. The night he had sanded floors while his daughter slept in a car seat. "Go home, Gerald," he said. Gerald blinked. "Marcus, I'm not firing you tonight because I don't have time and because I need to think clearly, but you need to leave this kitchen right now." His voice was still even, still low. "Dante," he called toward the prep station. Dante appeared in the pass-through window, a look of careful neutrality on his face that suggested he had heard more of the conversation than he was admitting to. "Yes, chef?" "I need you to clear the VIP appetizer course, all of it. The bisque is compromised, and I need you to call me an honest answer right now. What else came out of today's VIP prep that you think I should look at?" Dante hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. Then, "The lamb was marinated in a batch I didn't open myself. I don't know whose hands were on it before mine." Marcus nodded once. He walked to the door between the kitchen and the main floor, pushed it open, and looked out at his restaurant, the warm light, the occupied tables, the quiet hum of a Friday evening doing exactly what it was supposed to do. Vivian Whitmore was at the bar, her back straight, a glass of water in front of her, listening to something Elliot was saying, and nodding without particular enthusiasm. He had 2 choices. He could attempt to reconstruct the VIP menu from scratch with a compromised kitchen and a sous chef he suddenly wasn't sure he could trust alone, and hope that nothing else turned. Or he could do the thing that made his stomach drop just thinking about it. He straightened his shirt, walked toward the bar. Vivienne looked up when he approached. "Miss Whitmore," Marcus said, "I owe you an explanation." Vivienne set her water glass down with the careful precision of someone who had trained herself never to react before she had fully processed what she was hearing. It was a skill she had developed over years of boardroom negotiations, contract disputes, and the particular kind of conversation where the other person was about to tell you something they hoped you would absorb quietly and move past without making it difficult for them. She had never been good at moving past things quietly, but she had become very good at appearing to. "Go ahead," she said. Marcus stood across from her at the bar, and she noticed in the way she noticed everything, cataloguing it for later, that he did not sit down. He did not lean on the counter. He did not attempt to soften his posture to make himself less imposing, which most large men did instinctively in situations that required diplomacy. He simply stood, and he told her the truth. Not all of it. Not yet. He told her that he had discovered compromised ingredients in the VIP kitchen prep. Wine that had been improperly stored, cream that had turned, a marinade he could not fully verify. He told her that the integrity of the VIP menu could not be guaranteed to his standard, and that his standard was non-negotiable. He told her he was shutting down the VIP room for the evening. He did not tell her about Gerald. He did not tell her about the restaurant in Buckhead or the deliberate nature of what had been done. He told himself that was because the details were still unconfirmed, that he owed Gerald at least the dignity of an investigation before his name became part of a story told at a bar. But the truth, the part he didn't examine too carefully yet, was that he didn't want her to see the full damage. Not yet. Not until he understood it himself. Vivienne listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment that stretched 3 seconds longer than comfortable. "You're shutting down the VIP room," she repeated. "Yes. For my party. For tonight. Yes." "And the main floor?" Marcus paused. "The main floor is operating normally. The issue was isolated to the VIP prep station." She looked at him steadily. Her eyes were dark and direct, and Marcus had the distinct impression that she was not evaluating what he had said, but rather measuring the distance between what he had said and what he hadn't. "Most restaurant owners," she said slowly, "would have found a way to quietly substitute and hope I didn't notice." "I'm aware. Why didn't you?" It was a genuine question, not a challenge, not a test. She actually wanted to know. "Because you would have noticed," he said, "and because it wouldn't have been right even if you hadn't." Another silence, then something shifted at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, not quite its opposite. She picked up her water glass again. "My team will be here in 8 minutes," she said. "Is there a dinner option on the main floor that could accommodate 8 people, or do I need to make other arrangements?" "I can seat you at the corner configuration on the main floor. It's not private in the same way, but it's the furthest point from the other tables. Gerald—" He stopped, corrected. "My kitchen can run the full tasting menu from the main floor prep, which was not affected. I'll personally oversee every course." "You'll cook?" "I'll oversee. Gerald has left for the evening." This time the pause she gave him was different, sharper, the kind of pause that meant she had registered the gap and filed it. "All right," she said. "Seat us at the corner." What followed was the most demanding 2 hours Marcus had experienced inside his own restaurant. He ran the kitchen alongside Dante and a line cook named Rosa, who was 22 and terrifyingly competent, and who responded to the sudden elevation in responsibility by becoming extremely quiet and extremely fast. Marcus plated courses he normally only supervised. He tasted everything twice. He moved between the pass and the dining room with the controlled urgency of someone diffusing something that hadn't exploded yet. Vivienne's team arrived. 6 people, who turned out to be a mixture of her acquisition staff and 2 external consultants, one of whom had the particular exhausted energy of someone who had flown in that day from somewhere far. They settled into the corner configuration with the practiced ease of people accustomed to working dinners, immediately opening notebooks and pulling out laptops before the menus were even distributed. Marcus watched the table from the kitchen pass. He watched Vivienne at the head of it, the way she listened more than she spoke, the way she asked questions and then went genuinely still while the answers came, the way she occasionally glanced toward the window that looked out over the street below, as though she was cross-referencing something the room was telling her with something she already knew. He brought the second course out himself, pan-seared halibut with a saffron butter sauce and roasted fennel, which Rosa had executed with a steadiness that made Marcus quietly resolve to give her a raise before the week was out. He set the plate in front of Vivienne and straightened, and she looked up at him. "You made this," she said. Not a question this time either. Rosa made it. I watched. Is Rosa usually this good? Rosa is always this good. I don't tell her often enough. Something moved across Vivian's face, an expression he couldn't fully read, there and gone in less than a second. She picked up her fork. He was back in the kitchen when his phone buzzed. It was a message from a number he didn't recognize. You should ask your chef where he's been going on Tuesday nights for the past 2 months. Ask him who's been paying for his meals. A friend. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment. Then he forwarded it to himself with no annotation, set his phone face down on the counter, and finished the service. It was not until 10:40, after the last main floor table had cleared, and Dante was breaking down the kitchen, and Rosa had gone home with a thank you, that Marcus genuinely meant that Vivian Whitmore reappeared at the kitchen door. She knocked on the frame even though the door was open, which he noticed. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "I have several," he said. She stepped into the kitchen. She had taken off her blazer at some point during dinner, and without it, she looked slightly less like a magazine cover and slightly more like a person, which Marcus suspected was not an accident. "I want to tell you something," she said, "and I want you to hear it as information, not as a negotiation." "All right. I've been looking at this neighborhood for 8 months, specifically at 2 properties, a vacant lot on Irwin Street and a converted warehouse 3 blocks from here that's been on the market since January." Marcus said nothing. The plan was to build a boutique hotel, 40 rooms, rooftop bar, ground floor restaurant operated by an outside chef. Standard development model. She leaned against the prep counter with her arms crossed in the way she had been photographed 100 times. Except that right now it looked less like power, and more like someone who was thinking carefully about what she was about to say next. Tonight changed something. Not the food, though the halibut was exceptional. What changed was watching you shut down a room that would have made you a significant amount of money tonight, because you weren't certain the food was right. Marcus looked at her evenly. "I didn't do it for an audience." "I know," she said. "That's the point." He waited. "I'm not going to make you an offer tonight," she said. "I don't make offers when I'm still processing. But I want to have a conversation, a real one, about what you've built here and what it would mean to you to expand it. Not to lose it, to expand it." Something tightened in Marcus's chest. Not suspicion exactly, not hope exactly, but the particular feeling of a door opening in a wall you had stopped expecting to have doors in it. "I'd be willing to have that conversation," he said carefully. Vivienne nodded once. She pushed off the counter and reached into the pocket of her blazer, which she had draped over her arm, and produced a card. Actual cardstock, no QR code, nothing digital, just her name and a number. She set it on the counter between them. "There's one more thing," she said. "The reason my party was booked under a concierge service tonight, the reason I didn't put my name on the reservation, is because I've been having a problem in this neighborhood. 3 times in the past 4 months, locations I've shown interest in have suddenly become unavailable, or have had their asking prices raised dramatically within days of my team making inquiries. Someone is tracking my movements and using that information commercially." Marcus went very still. "Someone who would benefit from you not establishing in this area. Someone who is already established here and doesn't want competition." She held his gaze. "I don't know who it is yet, but tonight was supposed to be quiet. Nobody was supposed to know I was here." Marcus thought about the anonymous message on his phone. He thought about Gerald and Gerald's new employer in Buckhead, and the pressure that had been applied, not just to ruin a dinner, but to ruin a specific dinner for a specific guest on a specific night. He thought about the fact that whoever was behind this had known exactly who was coming to his VIP room. "Ms. Whitmore," he said slowly, "I think I may know something that's relevant to that." She looked at him, and this time she did not keep her expression neutral. What crossed her face was something close to alertness, the particular sharpening of attention that comes when someone who has been operating in the dark suddenly sees the outline of a light switch. "Then I think," she said quietly, "we need to sit down." They sat at the small table in the back corner of the now empty main floor, the one Marcus kept for himself on the rare nights he ate at his own restaurant. It was the least glamorous table in the Ember Lounge, tucked beside the service corridor, no pendant light directly above it, just the ambient warmth of the room winding down around them. Dante had cut the kitchen lights and gone home. The busser had stacked the last chairs. It was 11:17, and the Ember Lounge was entirely theirs. Marcus placed his phone on the table between them and opened the anonymous message. He turned the screen toward Vivian without commentary and let her read it herself. She did twice, with the focused stillness of someone who reads contracts for pleasure. "Tuesday nights," she said. "For 2 months," Marcus confirmed, "which is roughly when the pressure on you started in this neighborhood, based on what you told me." She set the phone down. "Your chef, Gerald, who approached him?" "He didn't give me a name. He said it was a new restaurant opening in Buckhead. He said they wanted your reservation list, your suppliers, your pricing structure. He said he didn't give them any of that." Marcus paused. "I believe the second part. Gerald has faults, but he spent 6 years building something real here. I don't think he handed them my business. I think they settled for the next best thing, using him to damage one critical evening." "One critical evening with me," Vivian said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. Outside the window, the old Fourth Ward moved at its late-night pace, a car passing slowly, the distant sound of music from a bar 2 streets over, the particular urban quiet that isn't silence at all, but the accumulation of 1,000 small sounds settling into something comfortable. "Buckhead," she said. "New restaurant. Do you know anything about who's behind it?" "I know of one group that's been buying commercial kitchen leases in Buckhead for the past year," Marcus said. "Meridian Hospitality. They've opened 2 properties in the last 18 months, both positioned as private dining concepts, both targeting the same clientele as Ember. I've watched them. I didn't think they were watching me back." Vivian's expression shifted in a way that was almost imperceptible, but Marcus was paying close attention now. "Meridian," she repeated. "You know them." "I know their parent company." She folded her hands on the table. "Meridian is a subsidiary of Greystone Capital Group. Greystone has been a minority stakeholder in 2 of my properties since I acquired them 3 years ago. They have board observation rights in both, which means they see my acquisition pipeline." The silence that followed was the kind that arrives when 2 separate pieces of a puzzle, held by 2 separate people, suddenly reveal themselves to be part of the same image. "They've been watching your expansion plans from inside your own boardroom," Marcus said, "and using that information to get ahead of me in neighborhoods I hadn't publicly committed to yet." Her voice was even, but something burned quietly underneath it. "Every time I've moved on a property in the past 4 months, the market moved first. I thought it was coincidence. Then I thought it was a leak in my acquisitions team. And I spent 3 weeks quietly investigating my own people." A pause. "It wasn't my people." "It was Greystone," Marcus said. "It was Greystone." She looked at the table for a moment. "And tonight, when they found out I was coming here, quietly, under a concierge booking, they moved fast. They didn't have time to interfere with the property, so they interfered with the evening. To make you leave with a bad impression of the neighborhood, of the product here, to make me reconsider." She looked up at him. "They underestimated 2 things. First, that you would catch it. Second, that catching it would make me more interested, not less." Marcus let that sit for a moment. Then, "What happens now with Greystone?" "I have a board meeting in 11 days, she said. "With what I know now, I can have their observation rights formally reviewed. My legal team has been looking for the specific mechanism they've been using. Tonight gives us the thread. If Gerald is willing to speak about who contacted him and what they asked for, that's corroborating evidence of deliberate commercial interference. That's not a small thing." Marcus thought about Gerald. Proud, complicated Gerald, who had cooked in this kitchen for 6 years and who had let fear and temptation lead him somewhere he clearly hadn't fully intended to go. "I'll talk to him," Marcus said. "I think he'll cooperate. I think he already knows he crossed a line he can't uncross." Vivian nodded. She looked around the room, at the brick walls, the low warm light, the paintings that caught the amber glow and held it. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask." When you opened this place is when you were sanding floors at 3 in the morning, or whatever the version of that story is for you. What were you building it toward? What was the goal? Marcus considered the question honestly, the way it deserved. Stability, he said finally. My daughter was 2 when I started. Her mother had been gone for 6 months. I needed something that was mine that nobody could take, something I could point to. He was quiet for a moment. I wasn't thinking about empire, I was thinking about a reason to get up. Vivian absorbed this in silence. When she spoke again, her voice was slightly different, not softer exactly, but less professionally managed. My daughter is 11, she said. She lives with my mother because I travel too much to give her consistency. I call her every night at 8 o'clock. A pause. I missed the call tonight. First time in 4 months. Marcus said nothing, but he didn't look away either. I keep telling myself that what I'm building is for her, Vivienne continued. That the hotels and the properties and the expansion, that it's a legacy, something she'll have. But tonight I sat at your corner table and watched you run a kitchen because your chef was gone and you refused to let the standard drop. And your 8-year-old daughter had been in this building earlier fixing napkins. She stopped, started again. You're building the same thing I am. You're just not lying to yourself about what it costs. The honesty of it landed in the room between them and stayed there. Marcus didn't rush to fill it. You don't strike me as someone who lies to herself, he said finally. I don't. But I've gotten very good at deferring the truth. She met his eyes. That's almost the same thing. He nodded slowly. Almost. Outside, a light rain had begun, the quiet kind, barely audible, just visible in the glow of the street lamp through the window, the kind of rain that arrives without announcement and makes everything smell like the city remembering itself. The conversation I mentioned earlier, Vivian said, returning to steadier ground, but not entirely abandoning where they had just been. About expanding what you've built here, I want to be clear about what I mean by that, because I don't want you to misunderstand the offer when I make it formally. I'm listening. I'm not interested in acquiring the Ember Lounge. I'm not interested in branding it or folding it into a portfolio or putting your name on a letterhead somewhere while someone else runs it. What I'm interested in is a partnership, a genuine one. The hotel I'm planning to build 3 blocks from here will have a ground floor restaurant. I want that restaurant to be yours. Operated by you, branded by you, staffed by you. I provide the capital and the structure. You provide everything that makes this room feel the way it feels. She paused. I've eaten in a lot of restaurants, Marcus. What you've built here isn't atmosphere, it's integrity. You can't manufacture that. You can only find it. Marcus was quiet for a long time, long enough that the rain outside became audible in the silence. I'd need to protect Ember, he said. This location, this operation, it stays independent, non-negotiable. Non-negotiable on my end as well, she said immediately. The original stays original, that's the whole point. I'd need full creative control of the new space, menu, staff, concept. I'd want approval rights on the concept presentation for brand alignment purposes. 1 round of feedback, then it's yours. And Gerald. He paused. Whatever happens with Gerald, the staffing decisions are mine. Completely. He looked at her across the small table, in the quiet of his closed restaurant, with the rain coming down outside and the amber light doing what it always did, making everything look like the better version of itself. Then I'd like to see a formal proposal, he said. Something genuine crossed her face then, not the controlled near smile from earlier, but something fuller and less managed. The expression of a woman who had spent a long evening in unexpected territory and found it worthwhile. You'll have it by Wednesday, she said. She stood, collected her blazer, and picked up her bag. At the door she paused and turned back, and Marcus was already on his feet. The napkins in the VIP room, she said. The fans. Your daughter did those? She did. They were perfect. He smiled then, fully, for the first time all evening. Don't tell her that. She'll never fold another napkin again, she'll just consider it done. Vivian laughed. It was a real laugh, unscheduled and unguarded, and it changed her face entirely. And Marcus thought that whoever had looked at this woman and seen only a title, and a portfolio had missed the most interesting parts by a significant margin. She pushed open the door and stepped into the quiet rain, and Marcus stood in the doorway of the Ember Lounge and watched her walk toward her car. The woman who had come to evaluate a neighborhood and left, having been in some way he suspected she was still calculating, evaluated herself. He turned back to his restaurant, the amber light, the brick walls, the paintings, the table where his daughter had sat earlier, spinning on a hostess stool with gold beads in her braids, entirely certain that 8 and 3 months was practically 9. He picked up his phone and called Ms. Patrice. "She's asleep," Ms. Patrice said immediately, in the tone of a woman who had anticipated the call. "I know," Marcus said. "I just wanted to hear someone say it." He locked the door, turned off the last light and walked down the stairs and out into the rain, which was still the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't ask anything of you, just falls and makes the whole city smell like something beginning. 7 years ago, he had sanded these floors, while his daughter slept in a car seat. He had built something that nobody could take. And tonight, for the first time, he let himself consider that what he had built might be only the beginning, not because someone powerful had told him so, but because he had stood his ground in his own house, told the truth when it cost him, and discovered that integrity, as it turns out, has a way of being seen by exactly the right people at exactly the right time. The rain came down on the old Fourth Ward, and Marcus Caldwell walked home.